Hey everyone, we're on the eve of the World Beach Ultimate Championships, and though there are some communities where Beach Ultimate is the go-to surface, most players will be making a big adjustment from Grass Ultimate to the sand. Some of these beach national teams have been facing off in preparation for World Beach. At XeQueBo a few weeks ago, France women took on Spain women. I was on the ground filming this game, and to be honest, I expected a blowout. France is stacked with star-studded World Championship winning level talent. From U20 standout Swan Lacoste Lefebvre, and 5 former Beach World Champions from the last mixed cycle with Maya Vacusi, Salome Rollet, Juliette Bertrand, Pedro Vargas, and 2-time World Games player and one of Europe's best, Elliot Bonnett. Whereas when you look at Spain's roster, there's fewer big names. The likes of Aina Perez, Julian Mas, and Marta Ortiz instead led a 7-player deep roster made up exclusively of women playing on the Spanish mixed national team to a tournament victory.
And XeQueBo champions in the women's division are Morras Cabronas.
But this Spanish women's team's advantage is that they don't have to adjust. Beach Ultimate is their bread and butter, it's the surface they most often play on, and maybe that's why this game didn't go how I expected at all. It was super tight back and forth, and ultimately France started with the disc on reverse point, but gave it away cheaply, and then Spain converted to knock France out of the tournament. I want to talk about why this game was so close, the differences in how these French and Spanish teams played, and perhaps give you some advice about how to adjust to Beach Ultimate. So let's see how this game went down.
And come away with the win.
First point of the game, Juliette Bertrand lost this inside backhand over the head of Laetitia Gouillet, but it's saved by Elliot Bonnett, who immediately shoots deep for Camille Larivière.
Bonnett takes it on the overthrow.
She doesn't like the separation Swan Lacoste Lefebvre gets, and instead leaves this backhand for Gouillet, but it's too wide and too far. On the next O point, Elliot Bonnett works hard for the first under, but she shows too much of the outside edge of the disc to the wind, and it drifts over Lacoste Lefebvre's head on the give-go. Here's the next turnover. Juliette Bertrand fires too fast.
Overshot there will give Spain the disc back.
Then Chloé Vallée saves this pass thrown just out of reach of Pedro Vargas, and Chloé Olivier cuts up the line and deep for the return pass, but Vallée's shot dies and drops out of the air far before Olivier can get there.
It's too far for Chloé away.
Next, Maya Vacusi dives to save this driven pass from Vallée. She gives and gets and then fires to the back corner for Olivier, who has steps, but it's just a little bit too far for Olivier to put a bid in. Here's France's next turnover. If you've already spotted the pattern, this one kind of goes against the grain. Aurora Langlois is unable to break the mark to hit Bertadot, opts not to hit Cusi on an under with little separation, then tries to hit Vallée over the top of a poach and over the top of her defender whilst Vallée has little separation. And in the meantime, Cusi sits free on the break side. On this next turn, Petitbon has huge separation on this under. She's noted Lacoste Lefebvre streaking deep and throws early, sitting the throw out in a spot Lacoste Lefebvre has no chance getting to. Our penultimate turn sees Bertrand look off the upline from Bonnett, but asks a little bit too much of Gouillet on the under.
Bonnett, but they go the other way and miss.
And then we're back to universe point. Vallée tries to lead Salome Rollet into space after some great dump defense, but the disc doesn't sit long enough and falls to the sand. I hope you've spotted the pattern, especially if this isn't your first Hive video. If you haven't, here's a clue. This is one of our turnover donuts, a tool used to understand why your team and the opposition is turning over. You can find this resource and dozens of others on our training tier Patreon. You can see there's a pretty dense concentration here. The problem is pretty exclusively throwing error, but not only that, it's basically the same throwing error time after time after time. The French women keep overshooting their targets. Of the 9 turnovers from them we have on tape, 8 of them are overthrows. Too far for Gouillet, drifting over Lacoste Lefebvre's head. Just out of reach from Juliette Bertrand, led out way in front of Olivier, this one barely out of Olivier's bidding range, nowhere near Lacoste Lefebvre, off the outstretched fingertips of Gouillet, and then too far for Rollet. It's brutal to watch, and that's not to mention these near misses where a backup attacker saves the day. In contrast, when you look at the 10 Spanish turnovers, there were 3 drops, 2 misreads, 2 underthrows, 2 overthrows, and 1 instance of poor towing in. But the key is the variety here, right? Sometimes the French defender made a great block, sometimes it was a miscommunication, players threw ahead of the target and behind, some of the blocks were on deep shots and some were on unders. So sure, there's stuff to work on here, but there's not just one big glaring issue.
Lewandowski looking for Fuentes, and Fuentes spends too much time boxing and not enough time with eyes on the disc.
You really don't need to be a rocket scientist to see what's going wrong here for France, or why it's going wrong. Receivers move more slowly on the sand, and here at XeQueBo, a week after EUCF, no wonder these elite players who have gotten used to playing on the grass are calibrated to the faster surface. The question is whether this France side and other elite sides who aren't beach specialists can adjust in time for Worlds.
Looking for Bortolotti, and it's gonna go too far, but only just.
In the last video on hucks, though it looked like hucks out in front of the receiver were much less likely to be completed, I was still hesitant to suggest throwers should take powers off that throw. This time I won't be so hesitant. France just need to stop missing their throws in the same way. When mistakes aren't equally distributed, there's probably room to change tactics. The French women should throw more directly, hit the cutter they're throwing to in stride, or err on the side of throwing it slightly behind the receiver to avoid risking throwing it uncatchably too far out in front. This is the opposite to the classic advice from coaches on grass, who usually tell throwers that if they miss, it's better to miss too far out in front of the receiver because it's easier for a receiver to pick up speed and close down the disc on the grass. And newer throwers often underestimate how much ground an attacker can cover whilst the disc is airborne.
Unbelievable athleticism from the Colombians!
The risk of a defender having a big enough speed differential to get a big layout block is just less on the beach, and putting on the brakes to catch a disc thrown slightly behind you is a little easier. So that's your number one piece of advice: stop overthrowing your receivers on the beach. Here's a quick tour of some other advice I have or I've heard from others. I asked the king of the beach, Pedro Vargas, for advice he gives elite players when he adds them onto his beach teams.
By Vargas!
And he says that elite players often run too much when they first start playing elite beach. Get efficiently into a good spot on the field, and then move when you're looked at. When I've watched his team UFA play, I find that more than in traditional grass ultimate, the cutters are happy to surround the thrower. Poaching is harder on the beach, and it's more valuable to have all your cutters close enough so that they can provide distinct options quickly. When I watched maybe the best beach ultimate player in the world, Elliot Bonnett, play at XeQueBo, I noted that he managed to get huge ups not just from a 1-foot jump, but from a 2-foot jump too, almost like a beach volleyball player.
After the epic high.
When you're running on the sand, it's generally advised to spend as little time touching the sand as possible, and keep an eye out for the bigger peaks and troughs in the sand to avoid tripping and falling.
That'll make it 2. Bonnett receives the deep shot.
If you want to see some great beach ultimate, I really highly recommend you check out some of this Morras Cabronas team at XeQueBo. Unfortunately, they were kind of too good to have a close game, but it's still so fun to watch them play. Check out the sharpness of their cuts, which ask for direct throws, and check out how absolutely always they manage to get free. Their cut success rate is just stupidly high. And if you're looking for more great film of Beach Ultimate, keep an eye out on the business end of the World Beach Ultimate Championships. We'll be discussing it on our patrons only Discord. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.
Will they do it again? They use the same line, but it's Navasa quickly delivering to Mass. And Morras Cabronas are looking like they're getting stronger with every point they play, which is inverse logic to what you would expect when you're running nearly savage lines.